everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing some ombre stamping on a Father's Day card, which is a little bit different. I'm going to be using this classic Father's Day stamp set from Joy Claire Stamps. This has some great classic car images in it, tons of great sayings, and two of those little flames. I'll be using those two flames today, and if you cannot see closely on my screen, I'll have a shot of this stamp set here in just a moment. But to do my stamping, I am stamping on an A2 side folding card base that I'll be using kind of in landscape mode here, if you want to call it that. And I've got, like I said, white A2 card base. I made this myself, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to be putting it in my MISTI to do my stamping. You can do this without a stamp positioner. It's just a little bit easier with your stamp positioner. And here is a look at that stamp set so you can get a closer look at the sentiments that are in it too. That way it just shows it a little bit better. Now, like I said, I'm starting off with the flames in the set. There are two. They're not much different, but they have a little bit of a different look. So I will be using both of them. And I've got 3 inks that I'm going to be using today. I've got Dandelion from Memento, Orange Zest from Paper Tray Ink, and Ladybug from Memento. That is what I'm going to be using to stamp each one of my flames. You're also going to need a dry cloth. I like to use this paper, or it's not a paper towel, it's an old towel that I've cut up into sections, and I like to use that. It's got that nice kind of texture on it, so I get a little bit of that texture on my stamping. And it just helps, you'll see here in a moment, with the texture when I'm going in to remove some ink. So I'm starting off with Dandelion, and I am double stamping this. I went ahead and placed down my clear stamp, picked it up with my lid of my MISTI, and I'm stamping it down twice. This is just going to give me a nice base to work with. Now, Memento inks and Paper Tray inks are both dye inks. They both stamp a little splotchy at first, but then they kind of mellow out into the paper and just get really nice and flat. And they kind of blend together, which is a great thing when you're stamping this kind of ombre stamping look. So I would suggest using dye inks for this technique. You can use pigment inks, just know that they're not going to blend and they're going to layer on top of each other. Now I've come in with my orange ink. I've gone about halfway up the stamp, and now I'm going to take my towel and just press along where that line ended of where the ink stopped. That's going to give me a nice kind of blended look. It's not going to take away all the ink, but it's not going to leave it all on there. There's not going to be huge lines of like demarcation. That's the only thing I can think of right now, but it gives a nice blended look. So I stamped down the orange, and now I'm going to come in with the red right on top of that. So I've got my Ladybug ink, and now I'm only going to go about a quarter of the way up this stamp. I'm kind of turning it on its side and just getting the very edge of that once I get up towards the top of where I want to end my color. Then I'm coming back in with my towel, blotting away those harsh edges, and then stamping down again. This is why it's so nice to have the MISTI on hand, because I can stamp this down and I know it's going to stamp perfectly every time. I'm also using my Creative Corners. You've seen that. That just brings it away so I don't have to worry about hitting the edge. There's a closer look at that flame all kind of ombreed out. And it is just a really fun look on these flames especially. I'm going to create a whole background with these. I'm going to show you one more time a whole solid kind of flame here. And then I'm going to show you how I did ones that were hanging off the edge. So again, I'm going to double stamp that yellow ink. That's just going to give me a nice base, a lot of ink to kind of help with the blending. And plus I like the darker look of that yellow. It helps kind of blend in with the oranges and the dark red. So I stamped that down twice. I have moved on to the other flame. This is not the same one I stamped with in the beginning. You can see they're a little bit different. Not much, but just a little bit. Then I came in with my orange, went about halfway up with the ink, blotted to kind of remove those harsh lines right at the edge, and stamped it down. Now I remove the ink. You want to make sure it's nice and dry before you come back in with your towel again, or with your ink pad again. And then I went up about a quarter of the way with the red ink, the Ladybug ink, went ahead and blotted the lines and stamped it down. Now, whenever you get to the edges, there are going to be times when maybe it's just going to be a red piece on the panel. Maybe it's just going to be a yellow piece on the panel. I in this instance, for this one, I am going to go ahead and stamp all three colors just like I would any other time. So I'm stamping the yellow twice, then the orange once. I'm cleaning my stamp each time so I don't contaminate my ink pads. Then I'm coming in. Now this isn't going to leave much color on there, but it is going to give that little bit of blended look into the orange. You want to go ahead and stamp just like you would every other time. Even on times like this, when it's just going to be the red that's on there, because the red blends with the yellow and the orange in the other stamps, it's not going to be the same color red as if you just stamped it on its own. So even when it's just going to be the red on the paper as it is here, you can see I'm going through the same exact steps. Stamped my yellow twice, coming in with my orange, still blotting, still doing it all to get that kind of textured look in there. And finally, I'm coming in with my red, which is going to be basically the only color on that stamp. It's still got a little bit of that ombre, but it's going to match the rest of the reds that blended with the yellow and orange. I stamped just like I did on the first two all the way across this. I didn't stamp the very bottom because I'll be adding a layer of cardstock with the stamp on it. There's a closer look at that stamp and just how good those colors blend together once they're all nice and dry. Now to do my next stamping panel, I'm going to be using the classic card. This one is the one that looks like it's kind of sitting on a road, and I'm stamping it on an A2 size panel in the bottom right hand corner. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I will be coloring in with my alcohol markers. This is just my favorite ink to use right now, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp it down. And I'll be trimming this panel off. That's why I went with a full A2 size panel. I'm going to leave it 5.5 inches across, but I will be cutting the top off. I just wasn't sure how wide I wanted it. Now coloring this, very simple. I'm coming in with yellows and oranges to do my coloring. I'm starting with my lightest, just putting it down where I want the lightest color. Then I'm coming in with a medium shade. This is the next to lightest, and I'm filling in the rest of the card. Then I come in with another medium shade, kind of go closer to where maybe the shadows aren't. I'm still leaving some highlights in there. And I'll just continue to build up the color. Now, once this is all said and done, this is going to look more orange than yellow. But if you've ever looked at something that's orange with its highlights, you get some of the yellow peeking through. So that's why I went ahead and started off with that color. I'm going to be leaving all the colors that I am using down in the bottom left-hand corner. I am using Dick Blick Studio brush markers. These are alcohol markers. They're what I use. If you don't have these, you can always use your Copics. You can use Spectrum Noir. If you don't want to invest in alcohol markers, you can get the same look with watercolor markers, colored pencils. You just want to get a nice colored image and just take your time with it because this is going to be one of the main focal points of the card. In the center of each one of the tires, also on the front of the card, I used some grays. I used a little bit of blue in the windows. And finally, I'm going to come in with some straight black on those tires. Now, you could do some blending here. I just don't have the best luck trying to blend out black. It always bleeds on me. So I just color them in with straight black. I'm putting a little bit of grounding effect right underneath the car with some grays. I'm doing some tip-to-tip blending as well to get a nice shadow. And finally, I'm going to blend this all out with kind of a greeny antique white color to just give it more of that vintage look along the bottom there. There's a closer look at that car all colored up. And now it's time to finish off the rest of the card. So like I said, this has some great sentiments in it. I'm going to be using the Happy Father's Day on the outside of the card. I went ahead and trimmed that panel down to about 2 inches. Then I came up a 1/2 inch from that, so about 2.5 inches. That's going to give me enough space to line up the bottom of the panel with the orange panel, but still have enough space on the top to stamp my sentiment. I'm going to put these both in my Misty. That way I know exactly where I need my sentiment to fall. And like I said, I'm using the Happy Father's Day on the outside. These are great block kind of, not scripty sentiments. They're very manly, I guess you could say. I love the font on these. I'm going to go ahead and place that down on the left-hand side to kind of balance out the bottom of the card. And I'm using my Misty grids to kind of center that up, make sure everything's right, make sure it's nice and straight. Now I'll be using VersaFine Clear to go ahead and stamp this sentiment. This is kind of like your VersaFine pigment ink. It stamps just as well for sentiments. I've got a video coming up on what all you can use this with, so hang tight. And I'll be using these inks a little bit more in the future. They were a lot of fun to play around with. I stamped down that Happy Father's Day, and I am going to load that colored panel right on top of that, making sure that both of the bottoms of these are lined up. And then that sentiment, because I used my Misty, measured it out and everything, it fit perfectly right on top of that panel. Now that panel, I'm actually going to go ahead and pop up onto the bottom of my card. I like to use fun foam and double-sided adhesive like I'm using here. That's just my preference, but you can also use pop dots, you can use foam tape, just something to get that bottom panel a little bit more dimensional and add a little bit more interest to this card and kind of pull that back panel or that front panel away from the back where I stamped all those flames that I really kind of want to shine and stand on their own apart from that bottom panel. So that's why I'm pulling it away a little bit too, to draw more attention to it almost. So I'll go ahead and pop that right on the bottom panel or on the bottom of the card. And once that is done, that finishes the outside of the card. Now I did finish the inside of the card as well. I just did Your Classic from that same stamp set and then stamped two of the little flames underneath going in opposite directions. Very simple and easy to do. A fun way to finish off the inside of the card. And then you can write a little note down below and that card is finished. Thank you guys for watching. As always, there are a few more links on the left side of your screen you can click on. Happy crafting, everyone!